Hey everyone, thanks for coming. It is our fourth of four trainings. If you're watching the recording, we're really happy that you tuned in to find out how to testify in person. We're really excited because this really culminates your training on how to advocate on behalf of Fairfax, Nature Forward, other organizations on behalf of trees. So you guys all know me by this point, Renee Grebe, Northern Virginia Conservation Advocate, but I'm joined today by Lydia Lawrence. Do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you. My name's Lydia Lawrence, pronouns she, they. I am the Director of Conservation at Nature Forward and so excited to be here. I've gotten to work with Renee on planning these and going through these and so happy that we can partner with Fax to do these trainings. So thanks for having me.
And as always, we're really happy to have Christine Montanesi here from Fax. Say hi, Christine.
Hi, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us.
And if you have any technical questions or any issues, just go ahead and drop them in the chat. She'll be helping us monitor that. And so we have two main goals for tonight. Dive deeper into how to write good in-person testimony, which we did a little bit of at our last training last month. And then also really functionally how to walk in and actually go testify in person at the Board of Supervisors. As a quick review of where we've been, we've learned about the value of trees in addressing the climate crisis, how to communicate those values of trees to decision makers, how to craft one-on-one meetings to be successful, how to write a comment letter, and then dabbled into writing oral comments as well last session. So today, like I said, we'll dive in deeper on that front. This is what we'll go over tonight: how you affect change, figuring out how to demystify public hearings, how to actually testify, and then we'll just do another scenario tonight just to practice a little bit more. But the next two slides, since there's such a small group, you can just call out what your emotions are if you'd like, or put them in the chat box, either way. First, have you given testimony before at the government center? Go ahead and put it in the chat box if you have, and then tell us kind of how you're feeling, and you can put your number to it that associates with the little face here. And like, kind of why did you pick that number? But also, if you just want to call it out, you could do that as well. So we have some people feeling really good. So you don't even need this class, maybe. That's like maybe the best case scenario, because it means we're really going to be tapping you and counting on you for coming out for other advocacy efforts that we have. So that's good. Oh, it's interesting. Not before in Fairfax. Mark, where have you testified before?
I've testified at congressional hearings, and when I was working on behalf of my company, my association, and school board when I was PTA president.
I think if you can do Congress, you can do anything. That's that's amazing. Fantastic. And then for another question, if you haven't testified in the past, sounds like a lot of you have, maybe you've made the choice not to. What has kept you from testifying? And you can call it out or put it in the chat box, either one.
Renee, I had no idea how to do it the first time. Someone had to walk me through. And literally, I wouldn't have been able to do it without someone saying, this is what you need to do, and here's how to do it. So
that is actually why I worked with Fax. We did a similar kind of presentation for this back in 2021, because I felt the same way. Someone told me to testify before I worked for Nature Forward, and I was like, no way. I will never do that. I have no idea what to do. I wouldn't know what room to go into. And so we actually designed this with Fax to really help lower that barrier to say, it's possible. And then the first time you do it, it gets a little bit easier each time. I hear Mary's concern about the testimony won't change anything. And we'll talk about that a little bit later as well, but that's always it's certainly a feeling I think a lot of us have had when things don't go the same way that we're advocating for. If you have any more thoughts, put them in the chat box as we go. But I'm going to hand it over to Lydia to talk about affecting change.
Thanks, Renee. So affecting change with our testimony, talking about how we can affect change, and there are a number of ways to do it. The first way we can do it is educating the public uh, about issues, how things can be done, doing things like site visits. For example, if you're advocating to preserve open or green space, maybe you take a group of people on a walk there. Next animation. And you can do that as well with your local decision makers. I think if you haven't testified before or you don't have a close relationship with your uh, local leader, it's easy to assume that they already know or they know the issue or it's their jurisdiction, so they have to know. And most of the time, they don't. And it can be very eye-opening to take them on a walk on a site and explain why things are important or what solutions are. Additionally, I have found that some of the most effective ways to make change is by having a meeting with our local leaders or their staff. And it can be just as, if not more effective, to build relationships through conversation with a local leader's chief of staff or staff member to really discuss the issues, because they're going to be still talking to the local leader they represent. Next, Renee. Another way, which I'm sure we're all familiar with, is through protests. Protests can be very powerful, make a strong visual impact. There is a lot of power in numbers as well. And next one. And then the one we're here to talk about today is giving in-person testimony. Next slide. So there are a number of levels of government that we can affect change: federal, state, and local. All of these can work together, and there are organizations that advocate to each. We're going to focus on local today. But for your information, it's important when advocating locally to know the rules of your state when it comes to local laws. So, for example, Virginia and several other states in the United States are Dillon rule states. And that means that a locality such as Fairfax County is restricted from making certain local ordinances or passing certain taxes. For example, if Virginia has a law on trees that limits the number of trees that can be cut down or has a fine for certain things or a rule for development, Fairfax County cannot go beyond that rule or have a more lenient policy in the county. But additionally, it cannot have a more restrictive ordinance either. And laws have to pass in Richmond. Next. DC. DC's legislative session kind of goes throughout the year. They do have a group of council members and a mayor who makes policy and rules, but those policy and laws do have to be approved by Congress at a federal level. Next one. And then finally, Maryland. Maryland is also a Dillon rule state like Virginia, but where it has a more significant change is that it is also a home rule state, which means that for that example where you have a law that has certain restrictions on something, and in Virginia you can't be more lenient, a locality can't be more lenient, and it also cannot be stricter. In Maryland, a locality such as Montgomery County can actually be stricter than the law that is at a state level. So examples of this are foam bans, gas leaf blowers, Forest Conservation Act, things like that. Next slide. So we went through this before, but Fairfax County is composed of 9 districts. So you have a supervisor for each of the districts. We also have a chairman of the board of supervisors. So you have a total of 10 supervisors or elected leaders for the districts and one that oversees them. But we additionally, for land use, have a planning commission that votes on different land uses and development plans. And you have 1 commissioner per district and 3 at-large commissioners. Next.
So I will, I'll dive into demystifying public hearings a little bit and give some background about what they are. So public hearings are a chance to share your feedback on proposed new laws or sometimes decisions. And so there are rules for public hearings that are in the administrative code for the state of Virginia, sort of like Lydia was saying about how it's a Dillon rule state. We kind of get our base laws from the state, and then they are customized at the local level without going beyond that authority. But these public hearings are required for certain actions by the Board of Supervisors. It's also a chance to get your opinion on the public record. I know, there is this feeling that sometimes what you say isn't heard and that you're not really affecting change. But sometimes when you get your voice on the record, that can be really powerful later to prove a point or to make sure they know that there wasn't a movement to ask for a certain thing early on when they might say there's not. It's just a really great way to put a stake in the ground. And it's one of the best opportunities to speak directly to our elected leaders. It's not often you get all of them in the room looking at you, waiting to hear what you have to say. And really conversely, it's also really nice to hear from your fellow citizens. So you might be in the room and maybe you're hearing from opponents or other supporters. So you might find people to partner with that you didn't know about before, or you might hear a different perspective that you want to integrate into your talking points. So, and you can watch these public hearings later in the comfort of your own home. You don't have to just watch them live when you're there. So in that regard, it's nice if there's a topic that you're really interested in. I know it sounds a little bit policy wonky to curl up with your cup of coffee and hot chocolate and watch a public hearing, but sometimes it can be really interesting if you're interested in the topic. And then, to the point of, is testifying at a public hearing going to drive change? It's often the last step of a long process. So anytime you can get in sooner in that process, it's great. But sometimes that process is not very transparent. And you can use organizations like Fairfax and Nature Forward. Sometimes we dig into some of these that we might be more passionate about to see where the process is and get in sooner. But sometimes this is the only time that the public is proactively engaged. So, understand the context of where you are in the process when you're doing testimony for a public hearing. And then the board votes, they need a majority to pass. So like we said, this is your chance to talk to not only directly to elected leaders, but to all of them at once. So how can you move the needle on the people who might need the needle to be moved in order to get to your decision? There might be things that you do in terms of that affecting change. You may take them out for a walk before a public hearing so that when you're there in the public hearing, they hear another side as well. So think about that as well, how you might engage people. So who is your audience? Who are you talking to? First and foremost, you're talking to the Board of Supervisors when you're at a Board of Supervisors hearing, right? Whatever hearing you're at, if you're at a planning commission hearing, that is your primary audience. In the board's case, they're elected by you if you live in their district, right? That one person is elected by the people in your district. They serve the entire community. So I live in Franconia district, but still Supervisor Lusk, he still has to serve the whole county as well as Franconia. But they're also human, right? They put on their pants one leg at a time like we do. So be respectful, speak clearly, avoid technical jargon if you're lucky enough to get that wonky and learn it. Eventually you'll know all the acronyms, but it's helpful to just be very clear when you do testimony. You're also kind of talking to the other people in the room, right? They're there. Maybe, like we said, you're learning from each other and they might be learning from you as well. And there might be opponents in the room as well. So you might be, tipping your hand about how you're going to, fight against a proposal or fight in favor of a proposal that someone else is fighting against. So just acknowledge that they're there. And then, the press is also could be there. So be sure that, you're saying things that might go on record or get repeated later if it's in a public forum. So I'm going to hand it over to Lydia to talk about what message do you want to convey as you're doing oral testimony. And I'll say there's a great tip sheet from the Chesapeake Bay Foundation that we have that Christine will drop in the chat box for you. So you don't have to scramble and take a whole bunch of notes because these notes are generally in that tip sheet, but I'll hand it over to Lydia.
Thanks, Renee. So what message should we convey when we're giving testimony? And this can be a hard one, but less is often more. Next slide. When giving public testimony, where should we start? Well, we should always start by introducing ourselves. Hi, my name is Lydia Lawrence. I live in Herndon in the Drainsville district. It is a wonderful way to start. It lets your local leaders know which one of them you're voting for and where you're coming from. Next slide.
Can you stop?
So, okay, yes.
Can you stop for a second? I mean, I've been interrupted if I have not given my actual mail address. So it's not just district. At a planning commission meeting, they will stop you if you don't give your actual street address.
Yes, where you live. So give your address. And that's not universal across the board, but better to be safe than sorry. All right. So next, it's really important to disclose if you're representing a group. So for example, if I'm giving testimony on behalf of Nature Forward, it would be important to disclose that. If you're giving testimony on behalf of Fairfax, and if you have a financial interest as well, of course, or a conflict of interest, that's really important.
I would also say if you wear a lot of hats, be clear that you are not wearing a certain hat if someone expects you to be in that hat.
Yeah.
So if you're with more than one organization.
All right, next slide. So one thing that's really important, one of the first things I learned in giving testimony is making a clear ask. It should be obvious, it should be very simple, and state it at the beginning what you're there for after you introduce yourself and introduce who you're speaking on behalf of, or if you're speaking as an individual, make your clear ask. And you want to do it at the beginning and at the end. And then using credible sources. So this can be done in a few different ways. You can include this in your testimony, such as, a study from the Trust for Public Land states that, insert fact here. You can also, I know you guys learned about writing testimony before, so you could also bring a written version or email the clerk of the Board of Supervisors with some of these credible sources and ask them to pass on to the supervisors and refer to that in your testimony in case you don't want to spend time citing every single source. But it's important to make sure that you do have credible sources to back up the statements that you're making. Next. All right. And your opinion and your story. This is so important, especially when giving testimony. In your written testimony, you can fill it with all the credible sources and facts and studies, but in-person testimony is really a wonderful time to share an anecdote, share a story about why this situation matters, why trees matter to you, what you are seeing around where you live. And often those are incredibly compelling, and you'll see supervisors kind of look up and really start to listen about, oh, what's going on in my district or what's going on in my county. Next. All right. So like Renee said earlier, never assume your audience understands even the basics. And you heard all the different people who could be your audience. And especially with the Board of Supervisors, it's really easy to assume that they're local leaders. They must know exactly what I'm talking about. But every county is huge. You have OEEC, you have all these different places. Next. So avoiding jargon, EQUAC, DPWES, VDOT, All these things, all these different departments, not just avoiding it for your elected leaders, but also avoiding it for the public who are listening and could be learning something from your testimony. Next. So think about, how would you explain the issue to a friend over coffee? Or as Renee and I discussed, how would you explain this to your grandmother? And my grandmother told me last night, well, you have a really smart grandmother, so I don't think you can use me as an example. Words from her mouth. But think about who would, like someone who has no interest in an environmental subject, who's not involved in county advocacy. Why does it matter? How would you break it down for them? Next. So tips from a former stage actress and politician. The stage actress is not me, but these are some things we've collected from a colleague that Renee and I have worked with on things to think about when you're giving testimony. We all get nervous. Every single one of us get nervous when making a presentation, and it's very normal. You can do it a million times and still feel nervous. It's important to make sure you breathe and center yourself. Maybe you have a mindfulness practice you do. A lot of people bring their testimony written out because you have a limited amount of time, and maybe you've planned your words to fit that amount of time. It's okay to read off the notes. It's okay to, speak off of it, read, do a mixture of both, ad lib, as long as you stay within your time. It's okay to insert something from other speakers and react. And it's your time. So whether you're speaking as an individual and you get 3 minutes, whether you are speaking on behalf of an organization, you get 5. Do whatever you need to get your point across. Some things that can help as well is there are Toastmaster groups, acting classes to help if you are very nervous giving a speech. And then those things can also help if you're have to give a presentation at work, a skill that is translatable to different parts of life. And then you might want to watch YouTube videos or read books from people you admire. But your voice matters, and the point is to get out there. No one's perfect. Next. On to you, Renee.
Fantastic. And I wanted to lift up what Brett said in the chat box, which is you can talk to lots of different entities, not just the Board of Supervisors. We're going to dive into that because that process is specific, but you can talk to the planning commissioners. As Brett put in there, you can talk to the tree commissioners. I also happen to serve on EQUAC, which is the Environmental Quality Advisory Council. And I am hoping personally that we can convince our council to also have public testimony at every meeting, like I believe the tree commission does. So, look around and see if there are places that you want to speak. This same kind of process probably applies elsewhere. Just the exact steps might be a little bit different. So there's only 3 steps to testify for the Board of Supervisors. And Christine, if you could drop the link in the chat box now that has all the steps laid out. This is kind of how to testify. So the links and such that we put here are in there with brief descriptions as well. So here's the link that you would go to. If you know that there's a time to sign up for the Board of Supervisors, you can go to this link and you can go and put your name down for it. So there are a couple different things you need to fill out. The first thing is it'll always have here the week before a public hearing, the board packet will be released, that little tiny PDF icon you see. And the board packet is everything the board is going to talk about. It can be like 700 pages. Don't get daunted by that. Their one topic that you care about is in there somewhere. You just need to search for it. And then I'll show you like the staff report and lots of other things about it. You probably have already seen some of that content if you've been into the issue deeply, but maybe you haven't. And so then you can kind of see what they have. So it'll say what the public hearing is in that content. And it'll show you for sure the date of the public hearing. And then if this is a development project, it'll have an application number. But it also just might be that you're testifying for the budget, in which case you just say budget. The important thing to know is that when you fill this form out, it is going to a real person. So you don't have to be perfect here. they'll clarify if you got something wrong or that they don't understand. Don't worry about that. Further down the page, when you're filling this form out, it'll also ask you how you want to testify. And there are 3 ways that we'll talk about that you can do: in person, which I personally think is the most powerful. When you are there, it really makes a difference. That's not always possible. And I think speaking up anyway is better than not speaking up at all. So you can also do telephone, which we'll talk about, or pre-record it, send it off, and not have to worry at all about the night of the public hearing. So when you open up the board packet, they will tell you when your public hearing is going to be. So this is an example from 2021 when Fairfax County was looking at implementing a plastic bag tax. And you can see here, the time of that public hearing is 4:30 p.m. What you can also see here is that every public hearing is listed as 4:30 p.m., which means that no public hearing is going to be at 4:30 p.m. So sometimes when you're trying to figure out when you need to be where and what time you're going to be testifying, it can be really hard math to figure that out. If one of those things coming before you is a massively controversial thing that people are coming out for in droves, it could be very long. And you might not know that, right? So it can be a little bit challenging. But if you're early in the process, then you can do the math a little bit easier to know when your public hearing is. Just be aware of that. And then you have extra information in the board packet that does show you other things that, other details. But by that point, you probably know them already because an organization like Fax or Nature Forward might have told you. But if you're navigating it alone, the board packet has all the information. Once you sign up and you hit submit, it's a very simple form. It's almost everything you saw on those screens. You just get an auto response. This is the robot. That's okay. That means the robot is sending your message to the human being. And then next up, you're going to get an email from a human being, which is great. It is a cut and paste template, but so in that regard, you want to make sure they have all your information correct. So first, make sure they have the information that you've specified in terms of how to contact you. Make sure your phone number is correct. In this case, this was from July. So that's the last time I spoke in front of the Board of Supervisors. They also mentioned video testimony in case you changed your mind. So they tell you when you need to have your materials in. So just be aware of that. And then they also, right there up in the front of the email, they tell you what speaker you are when you signed up, and it tells you how long you have. So I was speaking on behalf of Nature Forward, and that was 5 minutes. If you're speaking as an individual, you'll have 3 minutes. So you should know that, and they should be able to put that there and reflect it back to you. And then, as Lydia was saying, you might want to submit written comments in advance. If you do that, there's also a time constraint for that to make sure it gets to be in the board materials that they have via email. Conversely, you can also print that out and bring it the day of the testimony. Then the last thing you have to do once you get this email is mark your calendar. Don't forget, and mark it, like I said, for some kind of big, long time, because you might not know exactly when you're going to be testifying. I'll hand it over to Lydia for how do you prepare your written up testimony.
Okay, so writing the testimony. So we talked about the points before about not using jargon and of course referring to the Chesapeake Bay Foundation handout as a guide. Next. So it's really, really important to time yourself. If you're an individual, as Renee said, you get 3 minutes. If you're representing an organization, you have 5 minutes. Usually, that's around 450 words, sometimes less. I think it's really, really important not to rush your testimony. Sometimes people speed read through their testimony if they have 5 minutes so they can fit in like 700 words. And it really loses the effects of in-person testifying, where you can have strategically placed pauses after that really heart-wrenching anecdote to get the feelings going and let them just sit with how serious this issue is. So it's really important to time yourself and do it a few times so you can practice reading at a reasonable pace, practicing where you put your pauses. Oftentimes shorter is better. You don't want people's eyes to glaze over. And when it comes to a testimony, if it's something big like budget testimonies, they often will after a while. I think the most important thing for your testimony is to personalize it. What makes this issue important to you? To Brett's question of written testimony matching your oral testimony, no, it does not. They should both have the same message of what you want, but you can put a lot more in your written testimony than you can put in your oral testimony. Your written testimony can have, I want fees for cutting down mature trees, and studies show this, and trees provide that, and they prevent heat islands, and this research has shown, and I have an anecdote. You're not going to have time for all of that in your oral testimony. So your oral testimony is really to focus on the heart-wrenching issues, your anecdotes, your story, why this is important to you. Then you can throw in a few facts and testimony in your testimony, but you can save a lot of that research for that written one if you go the route of doing both. Next. Practice. As I said, there's no substitute. Feeling comfortable. You may never feel comfortable, but at least if you force yourself to go through it a few times, you'll have an idea of what you want to share. Next. All right, video testimony. It is the only reason I have a YouTube account. Video testimony, it's not the same as being there in person, but it can have some advantages. For example, I think the first testimony I gave was at EQUAC, and I did a YouTube video, and I could put a PowerPoint presentation with my credible sources behind me as it spoke. Very advantageous. I've seen video testimonies where someone walks someone through a park to show the effects of invasives and taking down trees and why it's a serious issue. With video testimony, there's usually always a deadline that is ahead of the actual hearing. So the hearing could be on a Wednesday, and you have to upload your video by a Monday by 5 p.m. So it's really, really important to make sure that you pay attention to that. I'd encourage you, I've used a tablet, just set a tablet up, press the video record button. You could even, I've had people use your phone. Make sure the video testimony, play it back. I hate hearing the sound of my own voice too, but make sure you can hear yourself. That's really, really important. I've uploaded video testimonies before, and like the day of or the day before, the clerk is contacting me saying, we can't hear this video really well. Please, can you send another one? And I'm rushing around to record it. So make sure that you can, the audio's not soft. And if it sounds soft, do that recording again. Next.
All right. For
the video testimony is often played at the hearings. So depending, they could play the video testimony first. Sometimes they'll do in-person testimony and then save the video testimony for later. And sometimes with video testimony, you could get a speaker number, and they might go through 5 first in-person speakers, and then your number 6, and they'll play your video. I've seen it done all different ways. The nice thing is you don't have to be there.
yes.
All right, phone testimony. Phone testimony is a great way if you're feeling shy or you didn't get a lot of sleep and you don't want to be front facing on the call. An example of this could be like budget town halls or a hearing where they put a phone number at the bottom of the screen on channel 16 and they say, call this number if you want to give testimony, or if you sign up as Renee showed and you say you want to give phone testimony. So usually when you sign up for phone testimony and you have a certain number on the speaker list, you're gonna get a call from the clerk to the board of supervisors, and they're gonna say, hey, we're here with the testimony, your number thus and so, you're waiting for this person to speak and you're going to go on at thus and so time. You have X number of minutes to speak. And then once you hear these beeps, that means you're coming close to your time, and you need to wrap it up. Next. So when you get the call, and they will often share this with you as well, they will tell you there's often a lag. Make sure that you mute your TV, your phone, or I'm sorry, not your phone, your TV or your computer, so that you're not getting that, they're not getting that double feedback.
Because
So
in case you didn't know, you can watch the Board of Supervisors online on channel 16 in cable, or channel 16 streamed live. So if you're waiting for your phone call, you can be watching the public hearing at the same time. I forgot we neglected to actually put that in the slide.
yes, so that's why you have to mute yourself when they call you and you're on the phone with them, or if you're calling into a town hall. But either way, make sure you mute yourself. Next. So once they call you, sometimes they'll give you a little leeway and then they'll say, okay, you're on. Or you might hear them over the phone say, okay, you know, speaker number 6 is Lydia Lawrence, go ahead. And then you can just start speaking and giving your testimony. And they're not going to say thank you or ask questions or have a nice day. The phone's just going to hang up. That's it to phone testimony. And then finally, in-person testimony, which is what we're here for. As Renee shared, you can check the board packet. I often do so to double check when my subject's coming up, or the earliest I have to be at that very, very long hearing. I have sent many emails to the clerk once they email me to confirm. I've also called that 703 number. It's okay. Remember, everyone in this county and everyone who's elected works for you. They're here to help you. Next. And then on the day of, when you're going in person, be proud of your outfit. Now, this doesn't mean you have to go in a suit. We've had people who, like, you're advocating for an environmental thing, and people have done a special shirt like Fairfax, and they'll have people in their group wear that. Or there's usually no more taxes in Fairfax County group, and they all wear yellow. Your outfit can make an impression. It doesn't mean you have to be dressed up. Do remember the press could be there. So whatever you are wearing, be proud of it. And of course, you know, if you're sick, please bring a mask, wear a mask. And if you're worried about catching something, it is a large room, there are multiple people, bring a mask. And then, as Renee mentioned earlier, even if you send your testimony in the packet, it's very normal for people to bring printed copies of your testimony or a more extended version of written testimony, and then to hand it to someone, you know, print out 10 copies and have them handed to the Board of Supervisors. And it can be very helpful for them to refer to that packet as you're giving testimony.
I think the clerk sits, if you're facing the Board of Supervisors in the big boardroom, the clerk sits off to the left usually, so
Yeah.
can give them materials.
Arrive a little early, get ready for a long haul, depending on the issue.
So if you haven't been to the Fairfax County Government Center before, you can put it in your phone. Google Maps knows where it is. You walk up, you park. It's a huge building. It's very daunting if you've never been there before. Just walk towards the 12,000 there, go in the front doors, and there's just lots going on. It seems like it would be hard to navigate, but all you do is look for the board auditorium sign, which is right there. And as you walk closer, you can see it again, and it's pointing off to the right. You just go around that case right there. And there it is, the board auditorium. It looks like it's locked. It looks like you're not supposed to be there, but you just open the doors and you walk in. They're expecting you. They're all inside. They're talking. And if you're there on a special day, you'll walk in and it will look like this. So really be ready for anything. This was a day that I just came for a normal hearing. I did not usually walk in, and there might be 15, 20 people in a place this big. And this day there was something on the board docket to talk about dealing with guns. I think it was allowing guns on government property, I believe. And so everyone there had those orange stickers on saying that gun saves lives. So, you're in a room with a lot of people maybe you didn't expect to be with. And so that can throw you off if you're already nervous. But it's okay. Just be calm, walk in. Everybody has the right to speak. And you just hope they're not speaking before you if there's that many people. But just go ahead and find your own seat. There's nothing wrong with wherever you want to sit. In the audience, you'll see the guy with the camera. They do record this, so you might want to avoid walking in front of him. But just go ahead and take a seat. So, if you've never been to the government center before, I definitely recommend you just go in and walk around. I think you can peek in that room pretty much anytime. When you walk in, I didn't take any pictures of when you walk in. There's actually a hallway that you snake around before you get into that room. So you're never going to walk in and disturb a public hearing if you're walking in quietly. But it can definitely help you be less nervous. Like I said, just walk in and find a seat. Find out where they are on the agenda, because you might be coming in. It's like sometimes board meetings go from 9:30 in the morning until 11 p.m. at night. So they're always in the middle of some business. Just find out where they are on the agenda. Follow along. Bring a book. Bring your laptop. Bring something to pass the time if you think you're going to be there a while. And just wait for your name to be called, but always be keeping in the back of your mind, sort of like when you wait for a flight, right? You never want to miss your flight number. This is like, listen for your flight number. If you're doing something like a budget testimony where they do really get through people very, very quickly, they'll often call the next people down and have you wait. So it might be that you're 2 or 3 people away from testifying, but they'll have you move closer. So sometimes in that case, they do reserve the front row for queuing up. So, but when they do call your name, just go ahead up to the podium, give your testimony, do all the tips that we had up front with your name, your address, and then you're done. That's it. It's pretty easy at the end of the day. It sounds a little daunting, but honestly, it's very approachable once you know the steps. Now we are talking about Fairfax County here, but like and the Board of Supervisors, all the steps might be a little bit custom or different depending on what locale you might be in, if you're testifying somewhere else or at a state level, or if you're at a different organization like the Tree Commission or the Planning Commission or the Fairfax County Park Authority Board. So in our last meeting, folks had asked to see what good testimony looked like, an example. So let me see someone who's given testimony that you like. In 2022, James Waller, who I did not know, he was Friends of Colvin Run, he testified on behalf of Parks, and Lydia and I were there testifying on behalf of Parks as well. So it was so fun to see somebody testifying that I didn't know, testifying on the same thing that I was testifying for. So this link is in the PDF that we sent along to you, just so you can watch it again later. He's at the 1:04 mark. But here are some things to keep an eye on. It's a 5-minute testimony because he's testifying on behalf of the Friends of Colvin Run, and we'll watch it right now. Keep an eye on him. Has really engaging delivery, I think. He has good eye contact. He connects directly with the policymakers in the room, and he connects to the policies themselves, which is really nice when you can know those as well. He highlights data to back up his suggestions. And the thing I like about him is that he's not perfect. He stumbles. None of us have to be perfect. They know that we're humans, like the Board of Supervisors are human. He goes over time. This is my biggest pet peeve. I really don't like it when people go over time. So it was hard for me to choose his testimony because that's really not something that's respectful of how much the board has to get through in a day. So do please respect your time and time it well. So let's go ahead and watch it. Oh, I think I may not have shared my sound. Give me 1 second while I reshare and make sure I share my sound.
And speaker number 15 is James Waller. who's the president of Friends of Colvin Run Mill. Welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and the Board of Supervisors, for giving me this opportunity to speak to you today. I'm James Waller, president of the Friends of Colvin Run Mill and a member of the Fairfax Initiative. I would like to thank you all for your support of parks, and since it's one of your last budget hearings, Supervisors of House, thank you for your strong and consistent support for Colvin Run Mill Park. Thank you very much, sir. Today I'd like to emphasize a couple of points regarding the Park Authority's advertised budget, specifically the need for more resources for people and for trees, otherwise known as standing people, as I will explain. I applaud the advertised budget's proposal for a 2% raise for all employees and increases for merit and longevity pay. According to the Park Authority, providing the same pay increases for park staff funded from park-generated revenue will cost about $1.4 million and will have to be recaptured from increasing fees at the parks. Is this the best approach, given that the revenue model is already distorting the purpose of the parks and is being studied for possible revision? I respectfully ask that these pay increases for these revenue-based staff should be made from the general fund. Also important is ensuring that all park personnel slots are filled. It seems to be a regular practice that funds are diverted from staffing to take care of other needs. A sounder budget approach would be to meet these needs from the general fund and make sure that all authorized positions are filled. Last fall, the Resource Management Division, the division that staffs the parks, had 32 of its 87 positions unfilled. That figure is lower now, but one of the still open positions is at Colvin Run Mill, which has now only 2 full-time staff, down from 5 10 years ago. Not filling these slots mean that park programming and maintenance have suffered, as well as revenue generation. The Park Authority requested an increase of $5 million to maintain the same level of service as last year, but given new acquisitions and county initiatives, such as achieving zero waste. The advertised budget, however, provides less than 10% of this requested amount. To fulfill these other requirements even partially, will this mean that more slots will go empty as before? The advertised budget cuts 2 staff positions at a time when the Park Authority is actually asking for more people. 2 of those requested positions would be for mobile nature centers. Taking parks to the people is a beautiful idea, right? And the Friends of Colvin Run had talked about taking these simple machines to schools, a practice old-timers tell me was in play when the park had more staff. I suggest adding a naturalist and a historian to permanent parks and have them rotate with these mobile centers so that the parks can be taken to the people. Another 3 positions requested by the Park Authority are for professionals to care for the trees. In her book, Braiding Sweetgrass, botanist Robin Wall Kimmer explains how in her native Indian culture, trees are considered part of the community. They are called the standing people, and they provide invaluable ecosystem services to the entire community, such as running air and water purification 24/7. And you have acknowledged the importance of trees in the countywide energy and climate action plan by pledging to expand the tree canopy to 6% of the county area. But as Cindy pointed out, anyone who drives around can see that quite the opposite. Trees are being felled for development, and on parkland, invasive species have choked out live trees and are squeezing out native plants. The Miller's house at Colvin Run is completely camouflaged by dead and dying trees overgrown with vines from Colvin Run Road itself. It would be nice to think that forests could take care of themselves, but urbanization around these wonderful, life-supporting forests means that we have to take care of them, and the Park Authority needs the resources to properly maintain them for the good of us all. I understand that $500,000 has been found in the third quarter review for forestry contractors, but as the gentleman who represented the workers pointed out, this one-time infusion won't take care of trees for years to come. A more thoughtful approach would be to meet the Park Authority's request for 3 professionals. Robin Wall Kimmer suggests that trees deserve you and me speaking up on their behalf, and to quote her local councilwoman, this requires showing up at the damn meeting. Well, I'm showing up at this meeting. Just to wrap up, please fund salary increases for revenue-based staff from the general fund, ensure that all park positions are fully funded, ensure that tasks that are adequately funded so that resources aren't diverted from funding personnel, authorize a naturalist and a historian for these mobile parks, and authorize free merit positions to take care of the forest. And that would be taking care of the parks people and the standing people, the trees. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much. Speaker number 15.
So you can see how testimony is. You can go to that link and watch lots of people give testimony from that day. You can see lots of different styles. It can be really instructive to learn how others are doing it. I had a scenario, but I know we're running a little bit late and we only allocated an hour for this. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to skip past the scenario and we can come back to this if you want to test out your oral testimony writing skills after this, if you have a little bit more time. So let's skip to past that example. And well, I'm going to open up to Q&A just for a moment. I did see one question I think we didn't get to in the chat box, which is who is watching the video testimony? The video testimony is played, like Lydia said, oftentimes live at the testimony. So the board is watching it right there for EQUAC. They play it right there, just like you are there testifying live. So I think it is definitely more powerful than only written testimony because you are guaranteed that they have seen it. And that sometimes if it does come at the end, it might be that it's at the end of a very long thing, but I think I don't know, I've more frequently seen it put as part of it, but it might be organization based, like who chooses to do that.
Yeah, it is. The other thing I would say is that one of the advantages of video testimony is that I was a part of an organization and I had 6 members on my committee and we all took a piece of an issue and presented it. And then I uploaded all the videos and told them, you know, I'm signing up for testimony. Please play all these videos in a row. These are the speakers I'm signing up on behalf on. So you can be creative with it in ways that you may not have been able to. And I do want to point out in that video testimony, look at how he dressed. He had professional suit jacket and his Fair Parks shirt underneath. So that was pretty clever.
And I think just what you're saying, Lydia, kind of gets me to, I'll flip over to the advocacy opportunities. We can talk a little bit about that. If you have questions, raise your hand virtually so we can see it electronically, or put a note in the chat. You can unmute and chat about it. But as we think about, you know, what do you mean? How could I be a part of a block of testimony, right? You can do that because FACS or Nature Forward is going to reach out to you in the coming year. You've taken this training. We want to work with you. So this is all of the opportunities that we know of that we know are coming up. And there are plenty we don't know that are coming up. I think Betty Endy is on the call and can talk to you a little bit about the Let's Talk Trees.
Yeah, thank you very much, Renee. So FACS has a few different groups that they've set up, and they're basically the Let's Talk Trees are the people who in particular want to advocate for trees. The next 2 months we're meeting the 3rd Thursday of the month, and then in March and April it'll be the 4th Thursday of the month. It won't let me put all the info on here, but I'm just putting information so you can see the FACS position. The first part relates to protecting and expanding the tree canopy, and the second part relates to our goals related to protecting and enhancing parks. And I want to thank Renee for showing that video. That was really awesome testimony. It's hard to get up there and testify like that guy did, but I agree with Renee, like there's lots of different styles, and I always find that people don't plan it. A lot of times a group will be having multiple people testifying, and I'm always impressed that the different styles and the different points that people make work really well together. And I think the fact that the supervisors or, you know, whatever legislator you're talking to, hears more people talking about the same position. It's sort of like advertising. You're going to hit them a few times on it to get in their heads. So I think that's good. Anyway, if you are interested in attending the Let's Talk Trees meeting next Thursday, the 18th, from noon to 1, I just stuck my email address in the chat box, so you could either email me or email the Christine, and we can get you the Zoom link for that. So we'd love to have you join us if you're interested.
That's great. Thank you so much, Betty. And then it looks like January 18th is going to be a fantastic all tree day. So Christine, talk about the Tree of Life community.
Sure. So the Fairfax Tree of Life community is a brand new community. It's not specifically tree advocacy, but our goal is to green the grounds of faith communities, and anybody can come to our meetings. We also meet on the third Thursday of the month at 3 o'clock, and we join for roughly an hour. We are essentially a support group, and we share ideas. We'll have trainings, and our mission is that we are in our communities, at our congregations, and we are saving our trees through removing the vines. We're planting native trees. We're planting native gardens. We're talking about best management practices, and it's a group that's growing, and we welcome all who are interested.
And then I know in addition to these FACS events that you're going to be hearing more about, because you should be on our mailing list, hopefully at this point, if you have not unsubscribed, you're going to hear about the budget coming up. And if you want to help us out, respond to our calls for who can come join with us. And we're going to have your names at the top of our list since you took the training. But the budget is coming up. This policy plan update, we mentioned that back in the first training session that we did. That's going to be a big policy kinds of high level kind of thing. And it's going to go on for months. So that'll be a long-term thing you can get involved in. At the state level, I know we're talking today about Fairfax County, but right now, the General Assembly, this is the 2 months when laws are made in Virginia. And as Lydia said, we're a Dillon rule state. So oftentimes to get something done in Fairfax County, you got to go ask mom, right, which is Virginia. And so you got to go up there and ask for permission. So there's lots of tree related legislation that could be helping Fairfax County. So that will be important to speak up to say that our jurisdiction supports this, and getting your local legislators to say that as well. There is a General Assembly Lobby Day with the Virginia Conservation Network. That link there that Christine just dropped in, thank you, has it right there at the top of the page. And that's January 31st is their main conservation day. There's also a water day the day before. I'll be down there on the 31st driving down. It's fun. They set everything up for you. So you sign up and they set up a meeting with your legislator in Richmond. It's a powerhouse of a day. I think it starts at like 8 and you get home whenever, but I think it ends around 2 or something. If you've never done it before, it's kind of fun. Also, I know from talking with folks that are doing the state level advocacy and with some staff from Fairfax County, there's some legislation that is not going to be introduced this year because there's not the support at the local level for it. So we have work to do to get our Fairfax County Board of Supervisors to change their mind about some of it. So that is definitely something we're going to be doing, that is local advocacy to our Board of Supervisors in order to get them to say, yes, we will be supportive of this once it goes to the state next year. So look out for that as well. We have an HOA landscaping bill that Nature Forward helped to craft with another great advocate, Melinda Soltis. And so you can see that in our blog post there. We did an introduction to the General Assembly, and our bill is mentioned in there. If you live in an HOA and want to support having more flexibility to be able to plant with conservation in mind, please email your legislators now. We're going to have action alerts, and I don't know if fax will as well, but once bills have really been decided, we're going to be having action alerts to say, please email your representatives. These things matter a lot. You want to get these bills out of their little committees and back to the whole floor of the House or the Senate. So even though we're talking about Fairfax advocacy, again, this it all relates. So this is all to say there are some lots of options that you can do as next steps. And we'll go back to the Q&A in case you have any. But I will say this should not be goodbye. If we don't see you again in some way, shape, or form, I will consider this a little bit of a failure that we haven't engaged you enough to write comments, do one-on-one meetings with us or with you on your own, testifying in person. I want to see you guys out there with us independently, any way possible to get your voice heard. So I'm looking forward to working with each of you, and I'm sure Christine is as well. So I just want to say one big thank you